Before we begin, I want to warn you that this story contains mature themes. It deals with the challenges of new motherhood, family relationships, and infidelity. If these topics make you uncomfortable, you might want to stop watching now. The basement was quiet, too quiet, really. I could hear the muffled clatter of plates upstairs, laughter breaking through every now and then, but down here? It was just me. Well, me and Kyrie. Everyone else had rushed upstairs the second they smelled breakfast, like they hadn't eaten in days. I stayed back. I told myself it was because I didn't feel like battling over the last pancake, but honestly? I think I just didn't feel like being around everyone. The noise, the questions, the constant energy, it's exhausting sometimes. Kyrie was still in the bathroom, brushing his teeth like he didn't have a care in the world. He was always like that, calm, unfazed by the chaos around him. I grabbed my toothbrush and joined him. The mirror was streaked with water spots, but I could still see us clearly. Him, standing there like he owned the place, and me, trying not to overthink everything like I always do. "You're not hungry?" I asked, my voice louder than I meant it to be. I cringed at how awkward I sounded. He shrugged, not even looking at me. Figured I'd shower first. Less chaos that way. Less chaos. Yeah, I could see that. The bathroom upstairs would probably be a war zone by now, with my sisters fighting over the hairdryer and my cousins yelling about whose turn it was. Down here? Just us. Quiet. Peaceful. But also, strange. I don't know why it felt strange, but it did. I finished brushing and put my toothbrush back in my bag, glancing at him out of the corner of my eye. He was still at the sink, rinsing his mouth. For a second, I thought about heading upstairs, but something kept me rooted there. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was him. I don't know. "Who's going first?" he asked suddenly, looking over at me. I blinked. "Huh?" "The shower," he said, nodding toward the curtain. "Are you going first, or am I?" "Oh." I paused, fiddling with the hem of my shirt. "You can go. I don't mind waiting." He looked at me then, really looked at me, like he was thinking about something. Then he smiled, this small, crooked smile that made my stomach flip for reasons I couldn't explain. "We could just go together," he said. I froze. I didn't know what to say. I mean, he said it so casually, like it wasn't a big deal. But it was, wasn't it? Or maybe it wasn't, and I was just making it one in my head. I laughed nervously, even though nothing was funny. "Together?" I repeated, like I hadn't heard him the first time. "Yeah," he said, leaning against the counter like he had all the time in the world. "Save time." Save time. Right. Like that was the reason. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. But I didn't leave. I just stood there, staring at him, waiting for I don't even know what. And in that moment, everything felt heavy. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. It's hard to explain what I felt about Kyrie. If you asked me a year ago, I'd probably say he was just my cousin, someone who happened to share family ties and a few childhood memories. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. Not in any obvious, earth-shattering way, more like little moments I couldn't quite put my finger on. A joke that felt a bit too personal. A glance that lingered a second too long. I don't think anyone else noticed, but I did. And I wasn't sure what to do with it. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about him in ways that made me uncomfortable. Not because I thought it was wrong, though, let's be honest, I knew it wasn't exactly right either, but because I couldn't figure out where those feelings came from. Was it just curiosity? Some twisted version of admiration? Or was it something deeper? I hated myself for even wondering, but the thoughts always came back, like a song stuck in my head that I couldn't stop humming. Kyrie wasn't like my other cousins. He wasn't loud or obnoxious, always trying to prove he was the funniest or the smartest. He was quiet, the kind of person who made you want to lean in just to hear what he was thinking. He didn't demand attention, but he always seemed to get it anyway. Maybe that's why I noticed him so much. Or maybe it was the way he noticed me. We had this thing between us, unspoken but real. Like when we'd share a look across the room, both laughing at the same ridiculous thing without saying a word. Or when he'd make some offhand comment that only I would understand, and I'd feel like we were in on a secret no one else could touch. It wasn't constant, it wasn't like we were inseparable or anything. But when it happened, it felt different. Special. This morning, though, it felt like the world was pressing down on me. Everyone was upstairs, their voices blending into a chaotic hum that somehow felt louder than it should. I imagined my sister Braylee, always nosy, asking a million questions about everyone's lives, like she was interviewing us for a reality show. She meant well, I guess, but she never let anything slide. If she sensed even the tiniest bit of tension or weirdness, she'd latch onto it and pick it apart until there was nothing left. Then there was Tiana, the cousin everyone wanted to be. She had this effortless coolness about her, the kind that made people flock to her without her even trying. I used to envy her for it, but now I just felt tired. Tired of pretending I didn't notice the way she overshadowed the rest of us. Tired of comparing myself to her, knowing I'd never measure up. I could hear them all upstairs, laughing and arguing over who got the last piece of bacon, probably. The smell of eggs and toast drifted down to the basement, making my stomach growl, but I didn't move. Neither did Kyrie. He stayed by the bathroom, his presence somehow both calming and unsettling at the same time. "You're not going up?" I'd asked him earlier, trying to sound casual. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to go up either. Not yet. The noise, the questions, the energy, it was too much. Down here, it was just us. Just quiet. Just, something I couldn't quite name. I glanced toward the stairs, half expecting someone to come barreling down, but no one did. They were too caught up in the chaos of breakfast to notice that we were still down here. For a second, I thought about what Braylee would say if she saw us like this. She'd probably raise an eyebrow and start asking questions, her voice dripping with suspicion. I pushed the thought away. She wasn't here, and it didn't matter. Kyrie's voice snapped me back to the moment. "You're awfully quiet," he said, his tone light but curious. "What's on your mind?" I shrugged, not sure how to answer. How could I explain the knot in my chest, the way my thoughts kept circling back to him, to us, to whatever this was? I didn't even understand it myself. So instead, I said the first thing that came to mind, "Just tired, I guess." He nodded, like he understood. And maybe he did. Maybe he felt it too, that weird tension in the air, the weight of something unspoken but undeniable. Or maybe I was just imagining it. Either way, neither of us moved. The basement was quiet, the world upstairs carrying on without us, and for now, that was enough. The toothbrush in my hand felt heavier than usual. The soft bristles moved mechanically against my teeth, but my mind wasn't in the moment. My gaze kept drifting, stealing quick glances at Kyrie through the mirror-smudged surface. He stood beside me, brushing his teeth with that same unhurried calm that seemed to define him. The bathroom was small, cramped even, with the faint smell of mildew clinging to the air, but his presence made it feel different. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt louder than words. I tried to focus on the task at hand, counting the seconds in my head like that would make the moment less strange. But the closer I looked, the more I noticed how his broad shoulders shifted slightly with each movement, how his hair was still a mess from sleep, how he didn't seem to care that we were standing so close. I swallowed hard and rinsed my mouth, my hands shaking slightly as I turned off the tap. "You're up early," I said, breaking the silence. My voice sounded strange, even to me, like it didn't belong in the quiet of the room. He shrugged, spitting out toothpaste, before responding. "Figured it's better to get it out of the way now. Before everyone else starts fighting over the shower." I nodded, trying to think of something clever to say, but my brain felt stuck. The air in the room seemed heavier, thicker. I grabbed my towel from the hook and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "You going next?" he asked, leaning casually against the sink like we had all the time in the world. Yeah, I guess," I mumbled, avoiding his eyes. There was something about the way he was looking at me that made my skin prickle, not in a bad way, but in a way that made me feel exposed. Vulnerable. "We could just go together," he said, his tone so nonchalant it almost didn't register. But it did. I froze, my towel clutched tightly in my hands. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him, but when I looked up, his expression was steady. Calm. Like he'd just suggested the most normal thing in the world. "Save time, right?" he added with a small shrug, his lips curving into a faint, almost teasing smile. My heart thudded in my chest. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, I just stared at him, my thoughts swirling in a mess of confusion and disbelief. Was he serious? Was this a joke? But he didn't look like he was joking. I mean... My voice trailed off, my cheeks burning. I wanted to say no, to laugh it off, to do anything but stand there like an idiot. But the word didn't come. Instead, I nodded. Okay. I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was the way he was looking at me, or the way my heart seemed to race every time we were alone together. Maybe it was the part of me that was curious, that wanted to see what would happen if I stopped thinking for once and just let things happen. We didn't speak as we stepped into the shower. The small space felt even smaller with both of us in it, the curtain pulled tight around us. The water came on in a sudden rush, warm droplets cascading over my skin, and for a moment, I focused on the sound of it hitting the tiles. Anything to distract myself from the fact that Kyrie was standing inches away. At first, it was awkward. Neither of us moved much, our backs almost touching as we stood there, letting the water do its job. My mind raced, every thought colliding with the next. What was I doing? Why had I agreed to this? But then I felt it, the faint brush of his hand against my hip. It was so light, I almost thought I imagined it. My breath hitched. I didn't move, didn't speak. The air in the shower felt different now, charged with something I couldn't name. And then his hand was there again, more deliberate this time, resting on my hip. I turned my head slightly, catching a glimpse of his face, but he wasn't looking at me. His gaze was steady, focused, as though he was testing the waters. Literally and figuratively. My pulse was in my ears, drowning out everything else. I could feel the heat of his body, the way his fingers tightened slightly against my skin. And in that moment, everything else seemed to fade, the sound of the water, the weight of the world outside this tiny space. It was just us. Just this. I knew it was wrong. I knew I should pull away, say something, anything, to break the spell. But I didn't. I couldn't. My hands gripped the wall, my knuckles white, as I felt him move closer. The steam swirled around us, making it hard to see, hard to think. His touch grew bolder, his hand sliding to my waist, and I felt his breath against my neck. My thoughts were a jumble of guilt, fear, and something I couldn't quite name. I knew this wasn't normal, wasn't okay. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about consequences. I wasn't thinking about anything except the way my heart was racing, the way his touch sent shivers down my spine, the way the world seemed to stop turning. I didn't know what this meant or where it would lead. All I knew was that I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. And somehow, that felt like enough. If you're still with me, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, there's so much more to uncover. The sound of the water was the only thing anchoring me. It poured over my skin, warm and relentless, masking the thudding of my heartbeat. My hands were trembling, though I kept them pressed against the shower wall, trying to steady myself. My thoughts weren't steady, though. They were everywhere, flashes of guilt, excitement, fear, and something I couldn't quite name. Every part of me felt alive and on edge, as though I was standing too close to the edge of a cliff and couldn't tell if I was falling or jumping. I could feel Kyrie behind me, close enough that his presence pressed against my senses. His hand was on my hip, his touch firm yet tentative, as if he was waiting for me to push him away or pull him closer. I couldn't decide which I wanted more. My breath came out in shallow gasps, and I hated myself for how it sounded, how it betrayed the chaos inside me. What was I doing? What were we doing? The questions screamed in my head, but I couldn't bring myself to say them out loud. There was a weight to the air between us, heavy and suffocating, but it wasn't enough to pull me back to reality. My mind raced through every possible consequence. What if someone came downstairs? What if someone heard us? What if they knew? The fear tightened in my chest, but it didn't stop me. Nothing did. Kyrie's movements were slow, deliberate. His hands traced the curve of my waist, and I could feel the nervous energy in his fingertips, despite the confident front he was putting on. He wasn't as composed as he seemed. There was a hesitation in the way he touched me, like he wasn't sure if he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. But he didn't stop, and neither did I. The steam in the bathroom wrapped around us, clinging to my skin and making it harder to breathe. My head was spinning, my body torn between wanting this moment to end and never wanting it to stop. I felt his breath against my shoulder, hot and unsteady, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Every sound, the rush of water, the soft scrape of his hands against my skin, felt magnified, as though the universe had narrowed to just this moment. And then, as quickly as it started, it was over. The water ran cold, snapping me out of whatever haze I'd been in. My body tensed, the spell broken by the sudden chill. I turned off the tap, and for the first time I faced him. We didn't speak. I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes, and he didn't force it. The tension in the air hadn't disappeared, but it had changed. It wasn't heavy with anticipation anymore. It was heavy with everything we weren't saying. Guilt. Confusion. Shame. The silence between us was deafening, and I hated every second of it. I grabbed my towel and stepped out of the shower, my movements hurried and clumsy. My hands shook as I wrapped it around myself, the fabric rough against my damp skin. I could feel his eyes on me, but I refused to look at him. If I did, I wasn't sure what I'd see, or what I'd feel. "I'll let you finish up," I mumbled, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. I didn't wait for a response. I couldn't. My legs carried me out of the bathroom before I even realized I was moving. The cold air of the basement hit me like a slap, a stark contrast to the heat of the shower. My thoughts raced, crashing into each other like waves in a storm. What had I done? What did it mean? I felt like I was drowning in my own head, every possible emotion colliding at once. Shame. Regret. Confusion. And somewhere, buried deep beneath it all, something dangerously close to exhilaration. I dressed quickly, my hands fumbling with the buttons of my shirt. My skin still felt warm, but it wasn't from the water anymore. I could still feel his touch, like a phantom sensation I couldn't shake. I hated it. I hated myself. But I couldn't make it stop. When I finally made my way upstairs, the noise of my family hit me like a tidal wave. Laughter, conversation, the clatter of dishes, it was all so normal, so loud, and it made me feel like I was suffocating. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact as I slipped into the kitchen. No one seemed to notice me, and for that, I was grateful. But I couldn't shake the feeling that they knew. That they could see it written all over me. I grabbed a piece of toast and sat at the far end of the table, keeping my eyes fixed on my plate. My heart was still racing, my mind still spinning. I didn't know what would happen next, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. All I knew was that nothing felt the same anymore. The kitchen was alive with noise. Plates clattered, conversations overlapped, and laughter echoed off the walls. Normally, I'd find comfort in the chaos of my family, the way they could fill a room with energy. But today, it felt overwhelming, like the sound was pressing in on me, drowning out my own thoughts. My hands gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, as I tried to focus on the food in front of me. Toast. Eggs. Bacon. It all blurred together, and I wasn't even sure why I'd grabbed a plate. I wasn't hungry. Not even a little. I felt like I was being watched. Every glance in my direction made my stomach twist, even if it was fleeting. Did they know? Did I look different? Was there something about me now, something I couldn't see but everyone else could? My heart raced every time someone looked my way, even if they were just asking to pass the salt. "You're quiet today," Braley said, her tone light but curious. Her words cut through the noise like a blade, and I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. She was sitting across from me, her sharp eyes studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Just tired," I mumbled, forcing a shrug. My voice sounded weak, unconvincing. I couldn't even bring myself to meet her gaze. "You? Tired?" she teased, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. "That's new." I laughed weakly, hoping it would be enough to satisfy her, but the look she gave me made my chest tighten. Did she know? No, she couldn't. How could she? I glanced down at my plate, pretending to be engrossed in my food, but my appetite was non-existent. Across the room, I caught a glimpse of Kyrie. He was leaning against the counter, talking to Tiana, who was laughing at something he said. He looked normal. Calm. Like nothing had happened. My stomach churned at the sight of him, a mix of anger and confusion swirling in my chest. How could he act so casual? Did it not bother him the way it was bothering me? And then, as if he felt my eyes on him, he glanced my way. It was quick, just a flicker of a glance, but it sent a shiver down my spine. His expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes that made my breath catch. A reminder of what had happened. A reminder that I wasn't imagining it. The rest of the morning passed in a haze. I kept to myself, avoiding eye contact and sticking to the edges of every conversation. Every laugh, every glance, every small moment felt like it was aimed directly at me, even when I knew it wasn't. My paranoia was suffocating, wrapping around me like a second skin. Later, when the family gathered in the living room for a game of cards, I tried to blend in. I sat on the floor near the coffee table, my legs crossed and my hands fidgeting with the hem of my shirt. Kyrie sat across from me, his expression relaxed as he shuffled the deck with practiced ease. I couldn't help but watch him, every movement of his hands sending a ripple of tension through me. "Pass me those," he said, gesturing to the scorecards on my side of the table. I hesitated, my hand hovering over them for a moment too long, before I passed them to him. Our fingers brushed briefly, and the contact sent a jolt through me. My breath hitched, and I quickly pulled my hand back, pretending to adjust my position. "Thanks," he said, his tone casual. But his eyes lingered on mine for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It was enough to make my chest tighten, the weight of unspoken words settling between us. Braley's voice broke the moment. "You okay, Janelle? You're acting kind of weird today." I forced a laugh, waving her off. "I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well last night." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Sleep had been impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the morning in the bathroom, each moment etched into my memory like a scar. By the time the game ended, I felt drained. My interactions with Kyrie had been brief, but each one left me rattled. I couldn't look at him without my mind spiraling into a mess of guilt and confusion. Did he feel the same? Or was I the only one falling apart over this? That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts wouldn't let me rest. I stared at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in around me, and let the questions I'd been avoiding flood my mind. What did this mean? Was it just a mistake, a moment of weakness that I'd regret forever? Or was it something more? I hated myself for even thinking about it. For letting it happen. For not stopping it. But most of all, I hated how a small part of me didn't regret it at all. That part terrified me more than anything. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know if I could ever look at Kyrie, or myself, the same way again. The morning sun poured through the windows, bathing the living room in a soft glow that didn't match the storm brewing inside me. My family was scattered around the house, some finishing breakfast, others chatting idly. I sat on the edge of the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone, but my mind wasn't on the screen. It was on him. Kyrie was in the kitchen, his voice low as he spoke to Tiana. Every word that passed between them felt like a thread tightening around my chest. I tried to ignore him, to focus on anything else, but it was impossible. My thoughts kept circling back, replaying every second of what had happened between us. Janelle, Braley's voice, cut through my haze. "Are you even listening?" I blinked, startled, and looked up to find her standing in front of me, her arms crossed. She gave me a look, a mix of curiosity and suspicion, that made my stomach drop. Yeah, I said quickly, forcing a smile. "What's up?" "You're acting weird," she said, narrowing her eyes. "Weirder than usual, I mean." "I'm fine," I said, a little too quickly. My voice betrayed me, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Braley loved to dig. If she thought something was off, she wouldn't stop until she figured it out. "If you say so," she said, but her tone made it clear she didn't believe me. She plopped down on the couch beside me, pulling out her phone. "Anyway, Tiana said we're going out later." "You coming?" "Maybe," I said, barely hearing her. My focus shifted back to the kitchen, where Kyrie had just stepped out. His eyes flicked to mine for a brief moment, and I knew. I knew he was going to say something, and I wasn't ready. "I'll be back," I mumbled, standing abruptly and heading toward the hallway before Braley could ask any more questions. My heart was pounding as I slipped into the den, a small room off to the side where no one ever went unless they needed a break from the noise. Kyrie was already there when I arrived. He closed the door behind me, his expression unreadable. The silence between us felt deafening, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall, and avoided his gaze. "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "No, we don't," I shot back, shaking my head. "There's nothing to talk about." "Janelle, what, Kyrie?" My voice cracked, and I hated how vulnerable it made me sound. "What are we supposed to say? That it was a mistake? That we regret it? Fine. I get it. But talking about it won't change anything." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to act around you. It's like I can't stop thinking about it." My stomach twisted at his words. They mirrored my own thoughts, my own guilt and confusion. But hearing them out loud made it feel too real, too raw. "You shouldn't be thinking about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We can't let this happen again." "I know," he said quickly. "I know. It was a mistake. I was stupid, and I'm sorry. But it happened, and now I can't stop replaying it in my head." I looked up at him then, meeting his eyes for the first time since we'd stepped into the room. They were filled with guilt, with regret, and something else I couldn't name. "Do you really regret it?" I asked softly, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He hesitated, and the silence stretched between us. "I regret what it means," he said finally. "What it could do. To you, to me, to the family. But, no. I don't regret it." His honesty hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to yell at him, to tell him he was wrong, that he should regret it, that we both should. But I couldn't, because deep down, I knew I didn't regret it either. And that terrified me. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice trembling. "This isn't who we are. We're better than this." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "I know we are. But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make this go away." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made us both freeze. My heart leapt into my throat as the doorknob rattled, and Braley's voice called out. Janelle? You in there? Kyrie and I exchanged a panicked look, and I motioned for him to step back. Yeah, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Just needed a minute. I'll be out soon. There was a pause, and then Braley's footsteps faded. The near discovery left me shaking, the weight of what had just happened hitting me all at once. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. It was a mess, one that could ruin everything. This has to stop, I said firmly, turning back to Kyrie. We can't keep pretending this didn't happen, but we also can't let it happen again. Do you understand? He nodded, his expression somber. I do. I'm sorry, Janelle. For everything. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words felt too heavy, too final. All I could do was walk away, leaving him alone in the den as I stepped back into the chaos of my family, hoping that somehow, I could leave the weight of this behind. The house is quiet now. Most of the family has left, and the echo of laughter and chatter that once filled these walls is nothing but a memory. I sit on the edge of my bed, staring out the small basement window where the last rays of sunlight filter through. It feels surreal, the kind of stillness that forces you to think about everything you've been trying to ignore. I wish I could go back to before it all happened. Not because I want to undo it, though a part of me does, but because I want to remember what it felt like to not carry this weight. To not replay every second in my mind, dissecting it over and over until I don't even recognize the person I was. What happened with Kyrie, it wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a bad choice or a lapse in judgment. It was a reflection of everything I didn't understand about myself. My boundaries. My emotions. My weaknesses. For so long, I thought I knew who I was. But now? Now I'm not so sure. I don't condone what I did. I can't. It was wrong, plain and simple. But pretending it didn't happen won't change anything. If anything, it's forced me to look at myself in a way I never have before. To ask questions I've always been too scared to face. Why did I let it happen? What does it say about me? About the way I see relationships? About the way I see myself? The answers aren't easy, and maybe they never will be. But I know one thing, I can't let this define me. I can't let one moment, one choice, be the thing that dictates the rest of my life. I have to learn from it. Grow from it. Set boundaries I never thought I'd need and hold myself accountable for the person I want to become. Kyrie and I haven't spoken since that day in the den. We've been careful to avoid each other, to keep our interactions as normal and unremarkable as possible. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe some things are better left unsaid. But I can't help wondering if he feels the same. If he's struggling with the same questions, the same guilt, the same weight. I'll never know, and maybe I don't need to. To anyone listening, I don't have all the answers. I can't tell you how to deal with moments like these or how to make sense of the feelings that come with them. But what I can tell you is this, it's okay to feel lost. It's okay to make mistakes. What matters is what you do next. How you take those mistakes and use them to become someone better. Someone stronger. Human emotions are messy. They're complicated and confusing and sometimes downright overwhelming. But they're also what make us who we are. They teach us about ourselves, about what we value, about what we need to change. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that growth doesn't come from ignoring the parts of ourselves we don't like. It comes from facing them head-on and deciding to do better. As I sit here, letting the last of the sunlight warm my skin, I don't feel closure. Not really. There's still a part of me that's scared, of who I am, of who I might become, of whether I'll ever truly forgive myself. But there's also a part of me that's hopeful. Hopeful that this isn't the end of my story. That it's just the beginning of something better. Either way, I want to hear what you think. Tell me, what would you do if your world fell apart like mine did? How would you move forward? Let me know in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.